welcome State Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi, who just so happens to be my representative, so always good to be in your company. The Assembly member currently serves as the chair of the Assembly Education Committee and previously served as the chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Education Funding. He represents California's 66th Assembly District and is certainly a passionate advocate for public education and has been really instrumental in crafting landmark legislation on topics spanning from climate change to education to jobs and the economy. He has had success in securing increased funding for California public schools and universal high-speed internet access, another topic near and dear to Unite LA's heart, aiming to close the digital divide. He was born and raised on U.S. military bases overseas and moved to California in 1982. He became the first in his family to graduate college, attending the University of California, Berkeley, and later earning a JD from UCLA. So I am honored to welcome our first panelist, and we'll hand it over to Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alicia. I apologize for my technical difficulties here. I'm using a new system here that I'm still trying to figure out, and so thank you for having me. I want to make sure that you can hear me okay.
Absolutely. It is our pleasure, perfect timing, and we can hear you well.
Okay. Well, thank you. And good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me for this very important conversation on the teacher workforce shortage. We know that especially, we've had a teacher shortage before the pandemic, and things only got dramatically worse during the pandemic with many teachers working under extremely stressful conditions. There was a record number of retirements, resignations, teachers complaining about the stress, the burnout, especially as many in the public were calling on our schools and our kids to be able to get back in person in the classroom with the uncertainties of the time of the pandemic. And so we know that the number one reason why we are having a difficult time in attracting, getting more young people to be interested to enter into the teaching profession is because there historically has been and there continues to be a significant wage gap between teachers and those with similar educational requirements. The last estimate that we've had is that teachers earn 23.5% less than their similarly educated peers. And we know that when we look to other countries, especially like Finland and Singapore, teacher salaries are competitive, more competitive with jobs in fields like engineering, law, and business. There was a recent UCLA study that was conducted on why more young people are not interested in becoming teachers, and nearly 2/3 of those surveyed, young adults surveyed, cited pay as one of the top 3 reasons why they were not interested in becoming teachers. So, this is one area that I've tried to focus on. Last year, I introduced Assembly Bill 938, which is a bill that, a aspirational bill, especially I heard one of your moderators talk about, asking for an update on our current budget situation, but, especially given our current budget deficit, this was clearly an aspirational bill that I introduced last year. But, I think the cause is still righteous, which is that, how do we make teacher salaries more competitive so that we can continue to attract the the best people that we can get to enter into the teaching profession. We know that research consistently shows that the number one most important factor in delivering quality education is getting skilled, qualified educators in the classroom, and so with teachers, getting good teachers in the classroom being the most important factor to delivering quality education in our classrooms. We clearly need to do a better job in attracting more of the best and the brightest to enter into the teaching profession. So my bill last year, AB 938, was a bill that was setting an aspirational target of increasing teacher salaries by 50% by or before 2030, establishing funding targets for districts to monitor a school district's progress in terms of increasing teacher salaries, to get them, to send a clear message that we want to support teachers and that we want to support more young people to become teachers, so that we can be more competitive with the rest of the world in attracting more teachers into the teaching profession. There's one other important point that I wanted to make in terms of what it's going to take to attract good people to enter into to become teachers, which is again, when we look to countries like Finland and Singapore, they actually pay up to $30,000 for their teaching candidates. Whereas now, obviously with the increasing costs of higher education, many of our students have to go into debt in order to become teachers, and we try to address, help alleviate that financial challenge for young people that are interested in becoming teachers by starting our Golden State Teacher Grant Program, which pays up to $20,000 to students that are interested in becoming teachers. But again, that along with many other categories of education funding is at risk of being cut with this massive budget deficit that we're facing this year. So as chair of the education committee, I'm definitely going to be fighting not only to protect classroom funding as my number one budget priority, but also to try to protect these programs like the Golden State Teacher Grant Program that has shown early signs of success in terms of attracting more young people to become teachers. So why don't I just leave it there, and I don't know if this is an appropriate time for questions or conversation, but love to hear what your audience is thinking.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that framing, Assembly Member. And we do have a few conversational questions, many of which expand on some of the things you just touched on. So it was incredibly perfect framing. Thank you. And we will make time for Q&A from our webinar participants towards the bottom of the hour. So maybe I'll kick off with just thanking you for your leadership on that aspirational AB 938 bill last year. And just inquire, are there any other bills or legislative measures that you're currently supporting or perhaps considering supporting that address the teacher shortage?
Well, I just spoke at a conference of superintendents yesterday, statewide, and I think the consensus is clear that the number one thing that we here in the legislature can do to support, to address not only the teacher workforce shortage issue, but to support K-12 education overall is the budget. As I'm sure all of you know, between 80 to 85% of all school district funding comes from the state of California. That raises an interesting issue in terms of why, we've made tremendous progress in terms of increasing California's per pupil spending. Where just a few years ago we were at or near the bottom in the country in per pupil spending. Whereas this past, especially we've had good budget years. These past 10 years, we've had a pretty good run, and we have moved up above the national average, but still are far behind, many of the East Coast states that Alicia and I we had an opportunity to visit and to study some best practices in terms of early childhood education in states like Massachusetts and New Jersey. But both Massachusetts and New Jersey, for example, which consistently ranks among the highest in the nation in terms of per pupil spending, and also the highest in terms of academic performance. I know that money is not everything, but money clearly is a huge part of any solution, because education is such a people-driven business. Because again, 80 to 85% of a school district's budget goes toward salaries and benefits. That is why it's so critical for the state to adequately fund our school districts. A big difference between the Massachusetts and New Jersey versus California, of course, is that their schools are funded with their local property tax dollars. Whereas in California, that used to be the case, but especially after the passage of Proposition 13. Before Prop 13, California used to be the top 10 in the nation in per pupil spending. But ever since Prop 13, we have steadily declined in terms of the amount of funding that we provide for K-12 education. So that is clearly a challenge. That's our number one challenge in terms of addressing the teacher workforce shortage. Number one is try to avoid or minimize teacher layoffs. We are already hearing, Alicia, like in our communities, like for example in Manhattan Beach, I know that they've issued the March 15th statutorily required layoff notices, which are, it's preserving the right to lay off teachers. It's not necessarily that all the teachers that receive those notifications are going to be laid off, but that's just one of many examples. Here we're trying to incentivize more people to enter into the teaching profession, but when they started seeing and hearing about all these budget cuts and layoff notices, that clearly sends the wrong signal. We're not going in the right direction. So I think, again, I would emphasize first and foremost the importance of our budget to adequately fund our local school districts.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for reminding us that 80 to 85% of school funding is coming from the state. And, related, we all know, eyes wide open, that we are in a tough budget year or years. But we would love to hear a little bit more about perhaps what items in the January budget you're most excited about, and perhaps what you're keeping your eye on as we await the May revise. Would love to hear more thoughts on the budget.
Sure. Well, it's hard to come by things that we're excited about, in the budget, given that overall we're preparing ourselves for significant cuts in many areas. I think, to try to look on the positive side of all this doom and gloom that I'm talking about in terms of the budget, is that the governor's January budget proposal it continued to demonstrate that K-12 education continues to be not only the governor but the legislature's top budgetary priority. That while there are many cuts proposed in the governor's January budget proposal, K-12 education did pretty well, relatively speaking. The governor's proposal did not propose any cuts to many of the key post-pandemic recovery programs that we have initiated, whether it's providing universal meals so that no child doesn't get a meal, is hungry in the classroom. If you're hungry, you can't learn. The expanded learning opportunity programs and providing quality summer school and after school programs to help close the achievement gap. We know that in the middle class communities, what are we doing? We're enrolling our kids in all the summer enrichment programs and the after school extracurricular and other enrichment programs, tutoring programs. We want to make sure we want to do everything we can to help close that achievement gap, that are a reflection of the availability and the access to these type of summer and after school enrichment programs. That is the ELOP program. Literacy coaches to try to continue our efforts to try to reach universal literacy by before grade 3. I have a bill that I'm working on with Senator Susan Rubio to try to make kindergarten mandatory. Right now we have about 92% of eligible 5-year-olds that are attending kindergarten, but we want to close that gap as we're making strides toward our another big initiative that we have, universal transitional kindergarten. We know, Alicia, and I know as well as anyone that the biggest return on investment in terms of closing the achievement gap and providing equity in educational outcomes is investing in early childhood education. And so as we're striving toward continuing our commitment toward offering universal transitional kindergarten to all 4-year-olds, let's not forget the kindergartners, the 5-year-olds. Just continuing that overall effort of providing and expanding quality early childhood education, which we know, is the beginning of the achievement gap that often carries on once they get into the K-12 school system. So yeah, overall, I think the January budget proposal did protect a lot of the major policy and budgetary initiatives that we have launched in the last 5 years. The big question is whether we can continue to protect that in the May revise.
Thank you for that. And, would love your thoughts on, are there any other creative actions perhaps being considered to alleviate the teacher shortage, such as tax incentives for new teachers or housing subsidies for teachers in priority areas? Is there currently talk or movement on any of those kind of creative solutions?
Yeah, so we know that one of the biggest challenges facing Californians, whether you're a teacher or not, is the cost of housing. And so there have been several bills this year that, including myself, I was trying to help incentivize and streamline school districts to consider building workforce housing. I hear this issue, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, where we know that teachers are just struggling to be able to live anywhere near where they work. Just yesterday, I met with the Manhattan Beach Middle School theater teacher and some of his kids, and they were lobbying me on supporting arts and music education funding. We know that with the passage of Proposition 28, that we want to supplement existing funding for arts and music education, but that's facing some challenges, related challenges during these budgetary times. But trying to incentivize more districts to address the housing affordability issue for teachers. Many districts are exploring building workforce housing, and that's something that we want to support. Whether it's through like CEQA reform, streamlining, the permitting process for districts to be able to build workforce housing. Those are some of the proposals that are being discussed in the legislature.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think we have time for one more discussion question before we introduce our second speaker, and then we'll come back to audience or participant Q&A for both of you at the bottom of the hour. But I guess I just want to close this section of discussion asking, thinking about the participants on this webinar representing everything from institutions of education to local businesses to community leaders. Is there a supportive role that, for example, local businesses and community leaders can play in creating this supportive ecosystem that values and retains teachers? Would love to know any thoughts you may have on that role that various stakeholders can play.
Yeah, well, I know that I used to sit on the board of the Southern California Regional Occupational Center that serves South Bay school districts in providing career technical education. We are continuing to there are strong bipartisan support for career technical education programs that involve local businesses working with local school districts as well as the regional CTE programs like the SoCal Regional Occupational Center. I think these kind of collaborative efforts where our high schools, our regional programs, our community colleges are working with local employers to identify where the biggest needs in terms of workforce shortages, designing programs. I know, for example, like one of my favorite examples in our neck of the woods, Alicia, is a program that Northrop Grumman worked with El Camino College, where they had their Northrop engineers work with the El Camino College educators to train sheet metal workers and welders because they're in such high demand, for jobs either at SpaceX in the city of Hawthorne. They've grown from 0 jobs in 2006 to now over 8,000 jobs, building world-class rocket ships right in our backyard in the South Bay. Those rocket ships require a lot of sheet metal workers and welders, and so there's a shortage. There's a need for those workers, and so we have seen some of these great partnerships with employers and our educational institutions to collaborate to train their workforce that meets their needs.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that incredible example. Definitely proud to hear updates on that wonderful program. And if you'll stick with us, I see questions pouring in from our webinar participants. So we will give you a break, Assembly member, and we will introduce our second speaker, and then we'll come back for Q&A from participants. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Zacher Pandya. She is the Dean and Professor at the College of Education at CSU Dominguez Hills. And just a little bit more about Dr. Pandya. Prior to her appointment at Dominguez Hills in 2021, she served for more than 15 years at Cal State University Long Beach, where she served as a professor in the Department of Teacher Education, and she also served as an associate professor in the department. She has done extensive research on English learners, and notably, she has published over 20 peer-reviewed articles in journals. Dr. Pandya, her primary duties as Dean of CSU Dominguez Hills College of Education, they include supporting and enhancing current degree and credential programs, and establishing new curriculum and innovative programs within the college as well as with external partners. CSU Dominguez Hills really stands out for their commitment to work with local partners and communities, such as their work with LAUSD to prepare transformational educators who positively impact our local communities. Additionally, their College of Education has demonstrated a commitment to addressing key issues that impact our educator workforce, such as preparing future teachers that reflect our diverse communities, addressing teacher shortage impacts in early care and education, and creating teachers that will support English language learners. So I am pleased to introduce Dr. Pandya. We are eager to learn more about the great work you and your team are leading at CSU Dominguez Hills to support our educator workforce. Welcome, Dr. Pandya.
Hey, Lisa, thanks so much. Thanks for having me, folks. I'm really excited to be with Assemblymember Muratsuchi on this call. I feel like there's a lot of, we're kindred spirits in the work we're trying to do to support K-12 and teacher education. So thanks for having me. I'm going to talk for a few minutes first about what we're doing at Dominguez Hills and teacher preparation context, because I saw a question or two also around that. And then I'm going to share a few partnership initiatives we have going on here. So I don't know if you folks know this, the CSU as a whole, all 23 campuses credential about 5% of the nation's teachers. So we're really invested and interested in, me and my dean colleagues at other CSUs, in teacher preparation. And it's one of the things we focus on the most. And it is a complex contextual circumstance. Every teacher preparation program, we work with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, we work with state funding, and of course we recruit from our own students and from postgraduates to come into our credential programs. It is complicated to become a teacher. It takes a year and a half or a year if you really push it. And as Assemblymember Muratsuchi said, there are state funds out there. The Golden State Teach Grant offers up to $20,000 a year, although the funds are uncertain in the future. The Commission on Teacher Credentialing also has a bunch of residency dollars that are also being spent out now. And the residency dollars pay people up to $40,000 a year in the part of the year where they need it most, which is when they're doing student teaching. So our students come in and they take courses, and then there is a period where they're required to be essentially unpaid apprentices, where they work with a mentor teacher in a classroom for a semester. And that is the most critical funding period for our students. At Cal State Dominguez Hills, 92% of our students are students of color. And those numbers are fairly reflected in the teacher preparation pipelines we have. And I'm very proud that we can say our students are diverse, and our students come from local communities in South LA, Carson, LA, Torrance, Whittier, like all of our surrounding areas, and they're going to go right back and teach there. But they are also most often first generation, historically underserved, Pell Grant recipients, and these are the folks who need funding the most. And so our challenge is trying to find ways to entice them to come be teachers, which, as the Assemblymember said, it's a complicated time to step into being a teacher when you're hearing about shortages and you're hearing about cuts. And our job here is to say, come in and we'll make it as great a learning experience as we can, but we'll also try to make it as inexpensive as possible. But also you'll need to quit a job for a while. And most of our students work more than one job. Most of them work more than two jobs anyway. So that's asking people to give up a lot of certainty for a period where they will work without certainty for a future job. So I want to say, and many of our students are taking advantage of the Golden State Teacher Grant and the residency, and we have residency grants. So I want to tell you a little bit about a few of those initiatives. The first one I want to talk about is a three-way partnership with LAUSD and with the Teacher Village Fellowship, and that's a local nonprofit run by Drs. Peter and Dee Dee Watts, who are themselves DH alumni. And we just received a $400,000 residency grant from the state of California. So for 4 years, we'll be able to give $40,000 a year to 10 students a year. So it sounds like a lot of money, but not numerically, We aren't serving as many students as we'd like, but the goal of this is to recruit and retain Black male teachers into the teaching profession. So we're working with Teacher Village because what Teacher Village is doing is they're recruiting young men or men to come into the teaching profession, and they provide wraparound supports from life coaches to health and wellness coaches to housing. So they're doing really innovative work housing students because that is a huge cost for our students and our future teachers. And then we are the credentialing arm. Of course, we bring them in, we have classes and we cohort students, we help them get through our programs, and then they are doing their student teaching in LAUSD, where we've worked, Dr. Watts has worked closely with LAUSD to find mentor teachers who offer examples of teaching that our students will want to follow. So that's a really exciting project. And actually, we are using some other money that I'll talk about in a minute to support the mentor teachers in that project too. Another project that we have that is somewhat funded is all of our work around dual language teachers. So we credential about 30 Spanish language bilingual teachers a year. And I'm shaking my head like this because it's complicated. The credential pathways to becoming a dual language teacher, there's two main pathways. You can get an authorization added to your credential while you're in a credential program, or you can come back after you've gotten your credential and get a certificate. So we offer both of those pathways in Spanish. And then we also are starting a Korean dual language program. So we are credentialing about 3 Korean language teachers per year now at Dominguez. And we have funding from a National Professional Development Grant. It's $2.5 million, and it supports a lot of those students and our faculty in mentoring and supporting those future bilingual teachers. But it's a growing need in, of course, all of our districts. I know LAUSD incentivizes bilingual teachers, and it's an area where our faculty are really dynamic and our students are really eager. So we're curious to see how we can build that. I'm wondering if folks will have questions about that. The last partnership I want to talk about is our work around the PK3 credential. So I don't know if folks know, but the new PK3 credential is the newest credential in the state, has seen for years. We are just about hopefully going before the commission on an accreditation this summer to elevate our PK3 credential and start running it next year. We were lucky to work with the Balmer Group, who gave a historic donation to Cal State Dominguez Hills on the order of $21.9 million. Most of that work and most of that money is going directly to students in the next 6 years. So it'll fund scholarships for students who are going to come out with a PK3 credential, which will authorize them for those current and future TK classrooms, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. And that's a really exciting partnership. It's my college and also another college where the child development majors come from, because those are the most likely folks who will go get that credential. We're also using some of that Balmer money to support mentor teachers in our project with Teacher Village Fellowship, because a piece of it is around Black educator work and excellence. So I'm going to stop. I've been talking kind of fast, but those are 3 different initiatives going on here at Dominguez. In this context, as Assemblymember Muratsuchi said, where funding is somewhat contingent on state budgets and where we're trying to recruit people to do work that we know is really valued, but that doesn't always look like it's deeply valued. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks, Dr. Pandya. And you touched on several of my questions before we get to the participant Q&A. Would just love to probe a little bit more. And, so appreciate your collaborative spirit throughout the region. And as CSU Dominguez Hills collaborates with various school districts, I'm curious if you can share any more about how your program keeps a pulse on what district needs for their educator workforce what those needs are.
Sure. Well, I mean, we do it really practically once a semester. We live in semesters in the academy. Once a semester, we bring all of our district partners together, and it's mostly HR representatives at districts. So we have LAUSD, our biggest partner, always in the room, but we have HR folks from Linwood, Torrance, Compton, all of our surrounding districts come as well. And we share data. It's part of our accreditation process. We're required to do this, but we also like to do it. So we hear both what folks need, hear their hiring needs, and we talk with them about our program. So we do that twice a year. And that gives us a pretty good pulse.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And, as was already flagged earlier on this call, and really as with everything, the pandemic, of course, had a drastic impact on the educator workforce, as we all know. And certainly we saw significant and meaningful numbers of teachers leave the workforce. And so of course, I know this plays into every conversation, but would just love to hear more about how your team thinks about the impacts of COVID on this critical workforce, as you're preparing students to help meet the demands.
Well, I mean, I could talk about this for a few hours, so just cut me off at some point. But I think our student population in a college of education is kind of doubly impacted by COVID. Many of our students were impacted for all the learning loss, and I don't know how much you guys out there have seen about learning loss through the pandemic for the high school and college graduates. So some of our students are coming in and their own skills are not as high as they could have been because of the learning loss they might have faced in high school and even in the first year or two of college. So they're suffering on their own issues in terms of learning loss and also the mental and social, emotional, huge impacts of COVID. And then we're asking them to go out and teach children who themselves have also been impacted. So I don't have a full sense yet. I know that our classrooms are different. Our higher ed classrooms are different. Our K-12 classrooms feel different than they used to. Students have different needs. So our students are in that, I mean, it's an enviable place in some sense. You're right at the forefront. You just experienced this and now you're going to help students who've experienced this, but it is a complicated space for them. So there's learning loss and mental health issues. And of course, all kinds of related losses in the local communities around Carson that we work in. So we're definitely not done feeling the effects of COVID on all parts of our student lives, I'd say.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And want to expand on one or two more areas of some of the comments you made in your framing remarks. So in 2016, Prop 58 implemented the California Multilingual Education Act, which of course gives California public schools more control over dual language acquisition programs. And you shared a bit about and just wondered if you wanted to expand on some of the pathways or certifications that CSU Dominguez Hills or even other CSUs are providing students teaching dual language learners or English language learners?
Yeah, the pathways are there's a few, just because, as I said, the state, I mean, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing wants to be able to work with future teachers as well as current teachers. Underlying these pathways are a couple of language proficiency issues. So folks can take a test. It's the languages other than English, California subject exam test, to prove their language proficiency. Or what most of our students do is they take classes. So they'll take classes in Spanish language or Korean, for instance, to prove and get a high grade in that class to prove their language proficiency. And that's one of the major stumbling blocks. If many of our students come from, for instance, Spanish-speaking homes and they have conversational Spanish, but they're uncertain if their level of Spanish is high enough to be considered usable in a classroom for teaching. So a lot of what we do is we support those heritage language speakers to feel proficient in their own language use. And as I said, there are two main pathways in, for folks getting a credential, you take extra classes or you come back. We have a master's in dual language learning. So many of our students come back for an MA and they attach the certificate to that. So they have more MA, units for salary and higher learning, and they are authorized to teach in a dual language classroom. I will say that the context and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing recently revised their standards. So students now have to do some observation and student teaching in a Spanish dual language classroom, of course, as well as in an English only classroom. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And one other thing, you did such a great job of touching on all topics in your opening comments, but we've talked about how staffing transitional kindergarten has been a meaningful challenge. And with the already existing teacher shortage in the state and with California needing an estimated, 10 to 12,000 new teachers and roughly 25,000 new teaching assistants as TK expands, just wondering if you wanted to share any additional commentary on how CSU Dominguez Hills is working to continue to address this gap.
Sure. I mean, that's a daunting number. So happily, we're not alone in this. There are many folks doing this credentialing work. Well, we're working to build the credential itself, the PK3 credential. And as I mentioned earlier, it costs a lot to become a teacher. So we're really lucky to be able to have a lot of support from the Balmer Group to support those future teachers as they go through programs. The other thing we're doing is we're working with our local districts to fund TK units for teachers who want to teach or are teaching in TK classrooms and need the remaining units that they are required. So you can have a PK3 credential, or you can have 24 units of transitional kindergarten child development classes, and we're working to create classes that those teachers need and can take because they work full-time already through our extended education programs, and fund those as well. And we're working closely with our district partners who I think are in the same space that a lot of us are. We know the need is there. We know the need is coming. I'm excited about that assembly bill might mandate kindergarten and then on to universal TK as more classes open, I think, and as workforces are shuffled and people move around and folks with seniority may want to go into those kindergarten and TK classes. I think we don't yet have a handle on what it's going to look like on the ground, the changing workforce.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Pandya, and certainly appreciate both of your comments, Assemblymember Muratsuchi and Dr. Pandya. Happy to say we have no shortage of questions from webinar participants. So I will just flag we have about 7 or 8 minutes to share several of the participant questions with the two of you. And again, thank you to all of our partners and friends on the line who have submitted questions. So our first one, Assembly Member Muratsuchi, is for you. In July of 2023, Governor Newsom and the state legislature approved the Diverse Education Leaders Pipeline Initiative, a $10 million grant program to address the need for a more diverse and culturally responsive education leader workforce. Can you share a little bit more about this effort and the state's commitment to these investments, given our budget climate? And then there's a part B to the question. Are there creative ways we can help individuals more easily access their credentials with the proper training that can help get them into the classroom? So let me pause there, and happy to reread any part of that question if desired.
Let me try to answer the question and see if I might have left off anything. First of all, in terms of recruiting and training and getting more diverse teachers in the classroom, there's a strong and clear recognition of the importance. We know that California is a majority minority state, but our teacher workforce does not reflect that diversity. And we also know that the research is clear that student outcomes significantly improve when there are more teachers that students can relate to, that they can see themselves reflected in whether it's their race, their ethnicity, their life experiences. We know that there's strong data supporting the need to get a more diverse teacher workforce. To that end, we have been exploring everything from more funding to get more diverse teachers in the classrooms, to issues like the teacher credentialing testing programs. There have been some issues raised about whether the teacher performance examinations have had a disparate impact on teacher candidates of color. It's been an ongoing debate, and I'd love to hear what Dean Pandya may think about that, because there are also strong voices saying that these teacher performance examinations are absolutely necessary to make sure that we are getting qualified people in the classroom. But I just want to emphasize that there is a clear recognition of that it's a priority to get more diverse teachers in the classroom. Could you remind me what the second part of the question was?
Absolutely, my pleasure. are there creative ways, and this part of the question can be for either of you if you want to respond, are there creative ways we can help individuals more easily access their credentials with proper trainings that can help them get in the classroom? So I'm trying to see, this question doesn't say whether it's referencing funding or programmatic supports, but it's around creative ways to help individuals more easily access credentials. So I don't know if Dean Padilla, if you wanted to address that one, or if Assemblymember Muratsuchi, you wanted to weigh in on that one.
I can take a stab at it from my end. The problem is, and when we come to teacher shortages, folks always want to say, well, you know, I'll step in. I'm highly educated. I could become a teacher, and that is true. But we have a lot of regulations around teaching, and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing is fairly clear on what those are. So we have some local leeway in terms of subject matter, like what people's degrees are in, enables them to come into credentials faster. But there's still a lot of required coursework to become a teacher. There are ways, intern pathways are the main ways. Folks complete a series of 3 or 4 intern eligible courses, we call them, and then they can go be an intern, that is a teacher of record in a classroom. And there are many interns all over the state. Intern pathways, so actually you get paid a salary. The problem is you're also going to still need to complete all the coursework. And at this moment, the teacher performance assessments, which, you know, may or may not go away this year. So the demand is high. I mean, so actually an intern pathway is not a bad pathway for someone who is an adult already and, you know, can manage a large workload. They're harder on our younger students who sometimes need more support of a regular pathway.
Right. And, you know, Dr. Pandya, this next question feels related. And, you know, in your comments, you had touched on, you actually both had touched on the Golden State Teacher Grant. So Dr. Pandya, can you take us a layer deeper on how, whether it's this grant, the Golden State Teacher Grant, or other investments that support students going into the educator workforce, how those have been most helpful to program participants, how they've improved their professional development and training or supported them throughout the process?
I think it's fundamentally so that folks don't have to scramble and go further into debt. So they know, and many of my colleagues too, we advertise these things. We say, if you come here, you can be eligible for the Golden State Teacher Grant. We'll help you apply for it. It's a complicated process. And that money can support you in a time when you aren't earning as much money if you're becoming a teacher. The same with the residency dollars. So it's not so much about professional development as it is really allowing people the time to be in that student teacher apprenticeship space and not be worrying about how they're going to pay all of their bills at the same time. Or, you know, because many of our students give up an income if they're coming back in order to take, you know, 4 classes a semester and or student teach at the same time.
Thank you for that. And we'll close with a question that I would invite you both to weigh in on if desired. What can participants of this webinar, earlier we were saying it includes, you know, business, education, philanthropy, community leaders, but what can participants of this webinar do to be supportive of the educator workforce and or protect investments that are really critical to the success of individuals, particularly those from historically marginalized communities? And maybe we can start with you, Assemblymember Muratsuchi.
Well, thank you. I saw one of the questions in the Q&A, you know, in terms of property tax reform. I'm assuming that the question may have been directed to Proposition 13 reform. You know, I mean, obviously when we're talking about how critical education funding is for these everything from the Golden State Teacher Grant Program to all the funding that goes to school districts. It's either an expenditure issue or a revenue issue, and so I know that there have been calls for looking not only on you know, cutting the budget to address the budget deficit, but whether there are any new potential sources of revenues. But I know, you know, going back to your question, you know, that's a very complicated discussion in terms of businesses, already facing, California is a high tax state. We all know that. There is extreme reluctance to look at any new taxes, any new tax increases. So yeah, how do we strike that balance? I think, in communities that have the ability to be able to do fundraising to support their local schools, we've seen these education foundations filling a critical need. But we know that presents a huge equity issue because most of the state, cannot raise significant funds with businesses supporting their local schools through education foundations. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that question, recognizing that, again, that we're facing a difficult budget deficit, but the solutions are not clear, especially in terms of how businesses can get involved to help address the teacher workforce shortage or support their local schools.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Assembly Member. And I recognize we're at time, but Dr. Pandya wanted to give you a chance if you had any calls to action for attendees of this webinar.
Sure. Very shortly. I mean, you can always support students directly with scholarships. You can always support, these our higher ed institutions. We do a lot of this work that we do is unfunded mandates. So every assessment creates a need for somebody inside to do the work to keep the test scores and send them on. So we are always looking for actual financial support. But the other thing I think is to understand that we're all in this together. Like, it really actually does take our legislators working with the higher ed institutions who are doing the credentialing work and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing to keep talking to each other. So helping provide spaces where we can talk and learn from each other is quite useful.
Beautiful. And we are at time. I can't thank you both enough. Assemblymember Muratsuchi, Dr. Pandya, thank you for your time, for your energy today, for the great conversation.